We were 1,250 feet in the air. Inside C-130, doors open, wind screaming through the main cabin like the plane itself was trying to warn us. I was sitting in a chalk line. That's what they call the row jumpers. Sitting shoulder to shoulder with guys I've been training with for 3 weeks. The smell of engine fuel and body odor just swirling around. Full gear, chute on my back, eyes up, just watching the light on the door. Red light. When that light turns green, you stand up. You shuffle toward the door and you walk out. Here's the thing. I'm afraid of heights. I was afraid of heights then. I'm still afraid of heights now. Even watching a movie where someone's standing on the edge of a building, my hands get all sweaty, and that hasn't changed. And I walked out of that door anyway. 4 seconds of free fall, weightlessness, and somewhere in those 4 seconds, out of my mouth came a sound. A sound I will not repeat here because this is a family podcast and my daughter might be listening someday, but it rhymed with "oh ship." And then the static line caught. The chute opened and everything went quiet. Hey, I'm your host. This is I Took the Long Way, a podcast about life, detours, and somehow still being here to talk about it. Pull up a chair. Fort Benning, Georgia, mid-90s. I'm 19 years old and fresh out of basic training at AIT, and I'm on a bus that's pulling into Airborne School. And I look out the window and I see the towers. These are training towers, 250-foot tall metal structures they use to practice jumps before you ever get near a plane. And I remember sitting there looking at those things and having one very clear thought. What am I doing here? Not a rhetorical question, a genuine one. Because nobody made me do this, I volunteered. I thought it would be cool. I wanted the badge, and I wanted to be one of the few guys in military intelligence with airborne wings on his chest. That sounded great in the recruiter's office, but it sounded way less great from the parking lot of Fort Benning, just looking at those towers. But I was already on the bus, so 3 weeks. That's how long Airborne School takes. Ground week, tower week, jump week. And I need to tell you about ground week because ground week is its own thing entirely. So on the first day, our Sergeant Airborne stands in front of us and says, I'm paraphrasing this kinda, but he says, how many of you MFers weigh over 180 pounds? And about half the platoon raise their hands. He looks at them, shakes his head slowly and goes, I feel sorry for you. He was talking about landings. The heavier you are, the harder you hit. Physics doesn't care about your feelings. I was $125 soaking wet, so I just stood there, quietly grateful that I was skinny. Now, Fort Benning in the summer, oh man, I grew up in California and I've never experienced anything like that. It's not hot in the way that California is hot. California is hot and dry. You sweat, you find some shade, you're fine. Georgia in summer is something different entirely. The humidity hits you the second you walk outside, like someone threw a wet blanket over your whole body. The air is thick. You don't just sweat, you are immediately, completely, totally soaked. Within 5 minutes of being outside, your uniform is drenched. Within 10, you've forgotten what it felt like to be dry. And then there are the mosquitoes. Fort Benning mosquitoes are not like regular mosquitoes. They're large, they're committed, and they have absolutely no fear of you. You're in their environment. They know it. You're sweating through your uniform in 95-degree heat with 100% humidity, and these things are just everywhere, all the time, unbothered. And in this environment, they put us in sand pits to drill PLFs. Now, the PLF stands for the parachute landing fall. It's a very specific way of hitting the ground so you can distribute impact, so you don't destroy your ankles, your knees, your everything. And you drill it endlessly. We were jumping off platforms into the sand pits over and over until your body does it without your brain's permission. In practice, it means repeatedly throwing yourself into hot sand in soaking wet boots, while sweating through every piece of clothing you own, while mosquitoes treat you like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It was hell on earth. Genuinely. Beautiful, character-building hell on earth. The towers were broken when I went through, which sounds like a gift, but it really just means we got 2 full weeks of ground week instead of 1. And when you've got extra time to fill, they fill it with PT. You know in war movies when they show soldiers running in formation with combat boots hammering the pavement? That's literally what we did. Every morning. And I want you to know, most of the time in the Army, PT meant running shoes. Nike, New Balance, Asics, whatever you had. But not jump school. At jump school, you're in combat boots. Every day. Because they really want you to earn those wings. And here's the thing nobody warns you about. You don't walk anywhere at Airborne School. Not outside, not ever. You come out of the chow hall, your hat goes on, and you run to wherever you're going next. You come out of the barracks, you run. Doesn't matter if you know where you're going or not. Your feet better be moving. Because if a Sergeant Airborne catches you walking, you are on the ground doing 20 push-ups before you finish the thought. The first few days were something else. Just swarms of noobs outside every building doing push-ups. Guys coming out of the chow hall looking around, not sure which direction to run, getting smoked before they even pick a direction. I was one of them, more than once. But you learn fast. By day 3, you come out of any door and your legs are already moving. You don't think about it, you just go. Fear doesn't go away because you practice. You just get more familiar with the shape of it. And somehow that familiarity is enough to keep moving. Jump week. 5 jumps. That's what you need to earn your wings. I'm not going to walk you through all 5, but I want to tell you about 2 of them because they taught me completely different things. Before my first jump, something happened that I had never forgotten. There was a major on our chalk line, an officer. He basically outranked everyone in that aircraft. And when that light turned green and it was his turn, he froze, grabbed both sides of the door frame and just wouldn't go. Now, here's the thing about jump school. Rank doesn't exist there. Outside those doors, a major is a major and you will address him accordingly. But at Airborne School, the Sergeant Airbornes are gods. What they say, you do. Doesn't matter if you're a private or a general, you're a student. They're the authority, full stop. So this major is white-knuckling the door frame, holding up the entire chalk line. And if you hold up the line long enough, you miss the landing zone, which is a whole other problem. And the Sergeant Airborne looked at him, assessed the situation, and gave him a swift kick in the butt. Out the door he went. I'm not gonna lie to you, watching that did not make me feel better about my own departure from that aircraft. But it did teach me something important before I'd even jumped once. Rank, title, experience, none of it insulates you from the door. Everybody freezes. The difference is whether you go anyway. And sometimes you need a kick. The first jump, you don't have time to think, that's honest truth. The whole sequence is designed that way. You stand up in your chalk line, you hook up your static line, you shuffle toward the door in a line of bodies, and by the time you're close enough to actually see the ground from 1,250 feet up, the guy in front of you is already gone, and you're just moving because everyone else is moving. The fear is real. It's in your chest, your hands, your legs, but there's no pause. The machine is already in motion and you're part of it. Out I went. 4 seconds of what I can only describe as controlled chaos. Wind, weight, noise, and then silence. The chute opens and the whole world just goes still. And I don't know what I expected to feel. Terror probably, relief maybe, but what I actually felt was close to peaceful. Floating there, 1,000 feet above Georgia, looking out at the horizon, for about 30 seconds the world was completely quiet and completely beautiful. And then the ground came up fast and I remembered I had a job to do. I hit the ground, remembered my PLF, rolled, unhooked my left strap to collapse a parachute, got up, rolled the chute in my arms, and ran like hell. I did it, and I'm still alive. And that's when I realized why we had to run everywhere. When you're getting dropped into hostile territory, you need to grab your stuff and run. The second jump, man, I landed wrong. Not catastrophically, no stretcher needed, but I came in hot and I just didn't execute the PLF. Didn't roll out of it the way I'd practiced for 2 weeks. I hit the sand straight on like I jumped off a desk and just stood there and absorbed it. The shock of it froze my whole body. I didn't crumble, I just kind of bounced. Let my legs absorb the fall and then fell over sideways like a tree getting cut down. Just timber! Completely stiff. So I laid there for a second, checked my body, everything's still attached, that's good. Got up, gathered my chute, and ran back to the formation. The weird thing about a bad jump is you still have to keep jumping. There's no option to tap out and rethink your choices. You got it wrong, you got up, and you get back in line. That's it. And that's the thing about facing hard things that nobody really prepares you for. It's rarely just one moment of courage. It's the same moment, repeated. Show up, go to the door, walk out, hit the ground, get up, do it again. 5 times. After your 5th jump, they give you your airborne wings. And the way they pin them on, it's not ceremonial in the way you might picture. There's no velvet box or anything. What they do is the Sergeant Airborne walks down the line, takes the wings, and smacks them directly into your chest. No backing, just a pin going through the fabric and into your skin. Blood wings, that's what they call it. I stood there and let it happen. In that moment, I didn't feel toughness or pride or any of that. I just mostly felt the pin. But afterward, walking back to the barracks with those wings on my chest, something settled in me that I hadn't expected. I had been genuinely scared. Not movie scared, not exaggerating for a good story scared, actually scared. And I had done it anyway, 5 times. I'd hit the ground wrong and gotten back up. I walked out of that door at 1,250 feet with my heart trying to escape through my rib cage, and I had walked out anyway. And now there was a badge on my chest that said so. You see, in military intelligence, almost nobody has airborne wings. It wasn't typical for our MOS, so everywhere I went after that, every duty station, every unit, I was one of a small handful of people in the room who had those wings, and I never got tired of it. Not because I needed the status, but because I knew what those wings actually cost. I knew what I'd walked through to get them. The wings didn't prove I was fearless. They proved I was afraid and did it anyway. There's a difference, and that matters. If a major, a grown man with years of service, can stand at that door and freeze, then fear doesn't care about your resume. Doesn't care about your rank, your experience, or how many times you told yourself you were ready. It just shows up, every time, for everyone. And I landed like I jumped off a desk, so I'm not judging the major. But here's what both of those moments have in common. The major went out the door, and I got up from the sand. Not gracefully, not perfectly, but we both kept moving. That's the whole thing. Not bravery, not conquest, just keep moving. I think about that now as a husband and a dad because there are moments in this life that feel exactly like standing at that door. Like starting a new job or coming to terms with hard realities or even becoming a parent. Moments where the stakes are real, the ground is invisible, and every instinct is telling you to stay put. In faith, maybe the biggest one. Walking into church when I wasn't sure I believed. Sitting in the back, not sure I belonged. Not sure any of it was real or if I was just a guy going through motions. That was a door too. And I walked through it, slow, hesitant, but I walked through. Fear showed up every single time, and I jumped 5 times anyway. Not because the fear left, not because I had a better reason than I thought it would be cool, but because the chalk line was moving and I moved with it. And on the other side of every single one of those jumps, I was still here. That's what I want my daughter to know. Not that hard things stop being hard, but that you get up after a hard fall. Every time. Even after all of that, I'm still afraid of heights. Sometimes when people tell stories like this one, the built-in message is, I faced my fear and now it's gone. I conquered it. I'm cured. That's not what happened. What happened is I walked out of a door 5 times while I was afraid and I got some wings for it. The fear stayed. I just stopped letting it be the deciding factor. And then I never got stationed at an airborne unit. After all of it, the heat, the mosquitoes, the boots, the sand pits, the major getting kicked out the door, the borked landing, the blood wings, I got my orders and ended up at a non-airborne post. Those 5 jumps were the first and last jumps of my military career. In airborne culture, they have a name for that. 5 jump chump. Which is accurate because that's exactly what I was. But the jump still happened. The fear was still real. I still walked out of that door 5 times and nobody can take that back, not even the army. And that's the most honest version of courage. Not the absence of fear, not the perfect ending where everything you earn gets used just the way you planned. It's just the decision that fear doesn't get the vote. You get to the door, you feel it, you go anyway. I've been going anyway my whole life. Slowly, imperfectly, with bad landings and moments of lying sideways in the dirt, wondering what just happened. But I get up. That's the long way. That's always been the long way. Thanks for listening to this episode of I Took the Long Way. Next episode, I want to talk about the toilet that haunted me. Yep, you heard that right. So take care of yourselves, and if nobody's told you lately, you're doing better than you think. I'll see you next time.